Vadis chapter 39. Ursus was taking water from a cistern, and while drawing up a double amphora with a rope, was singing a strange Legion song in an undertone, looking meanwhile with delighted eyes at Ligia and Vinicius, who among the cypresses in Linus' garden seemed as white as two statues. Their clothing was not moved by the least breeze. A golden lily-colored twilight was sinking on the world, while they were conversing in the calm evening, each holding the, the other by the hand. May not some evil meet thee, Marcus, because thou hast left Antium without Caesar's knowledge, as Ligia? No, my dear, answered Ulysses. Caesar announced that he will shut himself in for 2 days with Terpnos and compose new songs. He acts thus frequently, and at such times neither knows nor remembers aught else. Moreover, what is Caesar to me since I'm near thee and am looking at thee? I have yearned too much already, and this last night's sleep has left me. More than once, when I doze from weariness, I woke in a sudden, with a feeling of with a feeling that danger was hanging over thee. At times I dreamed that the relays of horses which were to bear me from Antium to Rome were stolen, horses with which I passed the road more swiftly than any of Caesar's couriers. Besides, I could not live longer without thee. I love thee too much for that, my dearest. I knew that thou wert coming. Twice Ursus ran out, and my request to thee, Carine, and inquired for thee and at thy house. Linus laughed at me, and Ursus also. It was indeed evident that she had expected him, for instead of her usual dark dress, she wore a soft white stola, out of whose beautiful folds her arms and head emerged like primroses out of snow. A few ruddy anemones ornamented her hair. Vinicius pressed his lips to her hands. Then they sat on the stone bench amidst wild grapevines, and inclining toward each other, were silent, looking at the twilight, whose last gleams were reflected in their eyes. The charm of the quiet evening mastered them completely. How calm is it here, and how beautiful the world is, said Vinicius in a lower voice. The night is wonderfully still. I feel happier than ever in life before. Tell me, Ligia, what is this? Never have I thought that there could be such love. I thought that love was merely fire in the blood and desire. But now for the first time I see that it is possible to love with every drop of one's blood and every breath and feel therewith such sweet and immeasurable calm, as if its sweet and death had put the soul to rest. For me it is something new. I look on this calmness of the trees, and it seems to be with me. Now I understand for the first time that there might be happiness with such people I have not known thus far. No, now I begin to understand why thou and Pomponia Graecina have such peace. Yes, Christ gives it. At that moment Ligia placed her beautiful face on his shoulder and said, "My dear Marcus." But she was unable to continue. Joy, gratitude, and the feeling that at last she was free to love deprived her of voice, and her eyes were filled with tears of emotion. Vinicius embraced her slender form with his arms, drew her toward him, and said, "Ligia, may the moment be blessed in which I heard his name for the first time." "I love thee, Marcus," said she in a low voice. Both were silent again, unable to bring words from their overcharged breasts. The last little reflections had died on the cypresses, and the garden began to be silver like the form, the crescent of the moon. After a while, Vinicius said, "I know, barely I had entered here, barely had I kissed thy dear hands, When I read thy eyes, the question whether I had received the divine doctrine to which thou art attached, and whether I was baptized. No, I am not baptized yet, but knowest thou, my flower, why? Paul said to me, I have convinced thee that God came into the world and gave himself to be crucified for its salvation. But let Peter wash thee in the fountain of grace, he who first stretched his hands over thee and blessed thee. And I, my dearest, wish thee to witness my baptism, and I wish Pomponia to be my godmother. This is why I am not baptized yet, though I believe in the Savior and in his teachings. Paul has convinced me, has converted me, and could it be otherwise? How was I not to believe that Christ came into the world, since he who was his disciple said so, and Paul, to whom he appeared? How was I not to believe that he was God, since he rose from the dead? Others saw him in the city and on the lake and on the mountain. People saw him whose lips have not known a lie. I began to believe this the first time I heard Peter in the Ostranium, for I said to myself even then, in the whole world any other man might lie rather than this one who says, I saw. But I fear thy religion. It seemed to me that thy religion will take thee from me. I thought that there was neither wisdom nor beauty nor happiness in it. But today, when I know it, what kind of man should I be were I not wish truth to rule the world instead of falsehood, love instead of hatred, virtue instead of crime, faithfulness instead of unfaithfulness, mercy instead of vengeance? What sort of man would would he be who will not choose and wish the same? But your religion teaches this. Others desire justice also, but thy religion is the only one which makes man's heart just, and besides makes it pure like thine and Pomponius, makes it faithful like thine and Pomponius. I should be blind were I not see this, but if in addition Christ God has promised eternal life and has promised happiness as immeasurable as all might of God can give, what more can one wish? Were I to ask Seneca why he enjoys virtue, if wickedness brings more happiness, he will not be able to say anything sensible. But I know now that I ought to be virtuous, because virtue and love flow from Christ, and because when death closes my eyes, I shall find life and happiness. I shall find myself in thee. Why not love and accept that religion which both speaks the truth and destroys death? Why will not prefer good to evil? I thought thy religion opposes happiness. Meanwhile, Paul has convinced me that not only does it take it away, but that it gives. Paul has convinced me that not only does it not take away, but it gives. All this hardly finds a place in my head. But I feel that it is true, for I have never been so happy, neither could I be. Had I taken thee by force, I possessed thee in my house. Just see, thou hast said a moment since, I love thee, and I could not have won those words from thy lips with all the might of Rome. O Lygia, reason declares this religion divine, and best the heart feels it, and who can resist such forces? After a while he said with a lower and quivering voice, Thou wilt be the soul of my soul, and the dearest in the world to me. Our hearts will beat together. We shall have one prayer and what gratitude to Christ, oh my dear, to live together, to honor together the sweet God, and to know that when death comes our eyes will open again, as after a pleasant sleep to a new light. What better could be imagined? I only marvel that I did not understand this at first. I know as though what occurs to me now, that no one can resist this religion, and 200 or 300 years the whole world will accept it. People will forget Jupiter, and there will be no God except Christ, and no other temples but Christian, who will not wish his own happiness. Ah, but I heard Paul's conversation with Petronius, and those don't know what Petronius said at the end. That is not for me, but he could give no other answer. Repeat Paul's words to Miss Eligia. It was at my house one evening. Petronius began to speak playfully and to banter, and he does as he does usually. Whereupon Paul said to him, "How canst thou deny, O wise Petronius, that Christ existed and rose from the dead, since thou wert not in the world at that time, but Peter and John saw him, and I saw him on the road to Damascus? Let thy wisdom show first of all, then, that we are liars, and then only deny our testimony." Petronius answered that he had not thought of denying, for he knew that many incomprehensible things were done, which trustworthy people affirmed. But the discovery of some new foreign god is one thing, said he, and the reception of his teaching is another. I have no wish to know anything which may deform life and mar its beauty. Never mind whether our gods are true or not. They are they are beautiful. Their role is pleasant for us, and we live without care. Thou art willing to reject that religion of love, justice, and mercy through dread of curse of lives, replied Paul. But think, Petronius, is thy life really free from anxieties? Behold, neither thou nor any man among the richest and most powerful knows when he falls asleep at night that he may not wake to a death sentence. But tell me, if Caesar professed this religion which enjoys love and justice, will not thy happiness be more assured? Thou art alarmed about thy delight, but will not life be more joyous then? As to life's beauty and ornaments, if ye have reared so many beautiful temples and statues to evil, revengeful adulterers and faithful divinities, why will ye not do in honor of one God of truth and mercy? Thou art ready to praise thy lot, because thou art wealthy and living in luxury, but it was possible, even in thy case, to be poor and deserted, though coming of a great house. And then, in truth, it would have been better for thee if people confessed Christ. In Rome, even wealthy parents, unwilling to toil at rearing children, cast them out of their house frequently. Those children are called alumni, and chance might have made thee an alumnus, like one of those. But if parents live according to our religion, this cannot happen. And as thou, at manhood's years, marry a woman to thy love, thy wish will be to see her faithful till death. Meanwhile, look around. What happens among you? What vileness, what shame, what bartering in the faith of wives? Nay, ye yourself are astonished when a woman appears whom ye call univira, of one husband. But I tell thee that those women who carry Christ in their hearts will not break faith with their husbands, just as Christ's husbands will keep faith in their wives. But ye are neither short of rulers, nor fathers, nor wives, nor children, nor servants. The whole world is trembling before you, and ye are trembling before your own slaves. For ye know that any hour may rise an awful war against your oppression. Such a war has been raised more than once. Though rich Though rich, thou art not sure that the command might not come for to thee tomorrow to leave thy wealth. Thou art young, but tomorrow it might be necessary for thee to die. Thou lovest, but treason is in wait for thee. Thou art enamored of villas and statues, but tomorrow power might thrust thee forth into empty spaces of the Pandataria. Thou hast thousands of servants, but tomorrow these servants might let thy blood flow. And if that be the case, how canst thou be calm and happy, and how canst thou live in delight? But I proclaim love, and I proclaim a religion which commands rulers to love their subjects. masters the slaves, slaves served with love, to do justice and be merciful, and at last he promises happiness boundless as a sea without end. How then, Petronius, canst thou say that religion spoils life, since it corrects, and since thou thyself wilt be 100 times happier and more secure, were it to embrace the worlds as Rome dominion has embraced it? Thus discussed Paul, and then Petronius said, "That is not for me." Feigning drowsiness, he went out, and when going at it, "I prefer my Eunice, O little Jew, but I should not wish to struggle with thee on the platform." I listened to Paul's words with my whole soul, and when he spoke of our women, I magnified with all my heart that religion from which thou hast sprung, as a lily from a rich field in springtime. And I thought then, there is Poppaea, who casts aside 2 husbands for Nero. There is Calvia Crispinilla, there is Nigidia, they are almost all whom I know, save only Pomponia. They trafficked, trafficked with faith and with all oaths, and my own will not desert, will not deceive, will not quench the fire, even though in all whom I place trust should desert and deceive me. Hence I say to thee in my soul, how can I show gratitude to thee, if not with love and honor? This thou feel that in Antium I spoke and conversed with thee all the time, as if thou hadst been at my side. I love thee 100 times more for having escaped from Caesar's house. Neither do I care for Caesar's house any longer. I wish not its luxury and music. I wish only thee. Say a word. We will leave Rome to settle somewhere at a distance. Without removing her head from his shoulder, Lygia, as if meditating, raised her eyes to the silver tops of the cypresses and answered, "Very well, Marcus. Thou hast written to me of Sicily, where Aulus wishes to settle in old age." And Vinicius interrupted her with delight. "There, my dear, our lands are adjacent. That is a wonderful coast, where the climate is sweeter than the nights, still brighter than in Rome, odoriferous and transparent. There, life and happiness are almost one and the same." And he began then to dream of the future. There were there we may forget anxieties. In groups among olive trees we shall walk and rest in the shade. Oh, Ligia, what a life to love and cherish each other, to look at the sea together, to look at the sky together, to honor together a kind God, to do in peace what is just and true. Both were silent, looking into the future. Only he drew her more firmly toward him, and the night's ring on his finger glittered meanwhile in the rays of the moon. In the part occupied by the poor toiling people, all were sleeping. No murmur broke the silence. "Will thou permit me to see Pomponia?" asked Lygia. "Yes, dear one. We will invite them to our house, or go to them ourselves. If thou wish, we can take Peter the Apostle. He is bowed down with age and work. Paul will visit us also. He will convert Aulus Plautius. And as soldiers found colonies in the distant lands, so will so we will found a colony of Christians." Lygia raised her hand, and taking his palm wished to press it to her lips, but he whispered, as if fearing to frighten happiness, "No, Lygia, no. It is not who honor thee and exalt thee. Give me thy hands. I love thee." He had pressed his lips on her hands, white as jasmine, as for time they heard only the beating of their own hearts. There was not the slightest movement in the air. The cypresses stood as motionless as if they, too, were all breath in their breasts. All at once the silence was broken by unexpected thunder, deep and if coming from under the earth. A shiver ran through his body. Vinicius stood up and said, "Lions are roaring in the vivarium." Both began to listen. Now the first thunder was unanswered by a second, and a third and a tenth, from all sides and divisions in the city. In Rome several thousand lions were quartered at times in various arenas, and frequently in the night time they were approached the grating, and leaning their giant hands against it, gave utterance to their yearning for freedom and the desert. Thus they began on this occasion, and answering one another in stillness and night, they filled the whole city with roaring. There was something so indescribably gloomy and terrible in those roars that Lygia, whose bright and calm visions of the future were scattered, listened with a straitened heart and with her one and with wonderful fear and sadness. But Vinicius encircled her with his arms and said, "Fear not, dear one, the games are at hand, and all the vivari are crowded." Then both entered the house of Linus, accompanied by the thunder of lions, groaning louder and louder.